Why Winnie the Pooh is your ultimate life coach. One thing about me is that I love reading fantasy books. But last year, I wanted to read more self-help, only because I was on my whole self-development journey. What I found was, although the books I read was useful, they were incredibly and utterly boring. Until I came across a book that would change my life. Okay, that was a bit dramatic, but the book that I read was The Tao of Pooh. It was one of those books that was disguised as a self-help book. Not only was it lovely to read, but it was also very wholesome, because the pages were full of illustrations of Winnie the Pooh and his friends. The Tao of Pooh is a book that demonstrates the principle of Taoism, and this is demonstrated by Winnie the Pooh. Taoism is a philosophical and spiritual tradition, originating in China. To summarize it, essentially, it is all about going with the flow and to work with nature rather than against it. There are 3 main points that I would love to share with you, but I highly recommend you buy the book yourself, as it goes into more depth, and not only that, it gives you the experiences of Winnie the Pooh. Now, this isn't going to be a technical video about Taoism, but what I'll do is go through the lessons that I learned from the book. One lesson that I learned was that everyone is special, and it isn't to do with cleverness or what you bring to the table. It is all about your inner nature. In fact, this book talks down upon cleverness, as it can lead to a lot of ego. One quote that I highlighted was that the wise are not learned and the learned are not wise. Basically meaning that sometimes you have to look beyond what is in front of you, and that there are times that you won't have all the answers. I would like to point out that Rabbit, although the clever one out of the group, is always saved by Pooh, the silly one. This book also talks about how your weaknesses can also be a strength. An example being Piglet. He is the smallest out of the bunch, and although at times it can be seen as a weakness, it can also be seen as a strength, because Piglet can fit into small places. This could also be said about Tigger. Some could argue that his energy is too overwhelming, but without his energy, I don't think they would have gone on many adventures. Now, apply this to yourself. For me, my biggest weakness is my anxiety. You could almost compare me to Piglet in that way, but my anxiety helps me read the room. It helps me when I'm under threat, and it also helps me connect to others on a deeper level. This leads me to another banger of a quote, which is, one disease can lead to a long life, whereas no disease can lead to a short life. You're probably thinking, pardon? But essentially, it's all about that the person who knows their weaknesses can act accordingly, whereas those who don't acknowledge their weaknesses can also lead to a shorter life. Sometimes our weaknesses are the answers to our problems. This brings me on to another lesson that I learned, which is don't monkey around. Meaning don't try to tamper with the flow of nature. This reminds me of a time when I first graduated. All I remember thinking was that I wanted to work for the top 4 accounting firms. This being PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, and EY. I remember revising and praying I get the job. But what happened was that I got rejected. And I remember being so upset. But years later, I'm working in tech, and I have given up my accounting qualifications because it doesn't align with who I am. In Chinese, this principle is called Wei Wei. I think I'm pronouncing it right.
Well, anyway, Pooh goes into detail as he explains a time when him and his friends got lost. But knowing that everything will be fine, they continued to explore, and what they were able to find was their way back home.
The more that you try to fight with life, the more it fights back. So instead of fighting with the universe, see where it takes you. Another lesson I learned was how to be truly happy. This is called the Ode of Joy. One thing that was mentioned was the story of the stonecutter. This was a story of a stonecutter who came across a wealthy merchant and was very envious. He suddenly became a merchant overnight. Then as the merchant, he came across a high official. The next day, he became a high official. But then he had to kneel to the king, and so he had to become the king. And once he was the king, he was envious of the sun because it had so much power. So then he became the sun. But covering his rays was the clouds, and so he became a cloud. And he blew incredible winds, but the rocks didn't move below, and so he became the stone that he used to once cut. What this story shows is that the grass isn't greener on the other side, and one way to be happy is to be content with one's own reality. Pooh is incredibly happy. I mean, look at his house, it's in a tree. And he's so content with all the small things in his life, such as his honey and his friends.
From this, I want you to look at your current reality. What are you grateful for? And know that happiness is in your control.
I hope you enjoyed this video, so please subscribe and give us a like. Although this video is long to make, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions below. I would love to do some more long form content, so please give me any suggestions below.